What's going on, guys? Welcome to this week's episode of Ask Mish. So, this week I'm going to be a little taboo with you guys. We're going to talk about a question that somebody asked me that I think could be taboo, but I don't know. You know me. I like taboo things, and I just feel like maybe we can have a different conversation. Maybe I'll provide a different perspective. Maybe you're going to like fight me about it in the comments, like whatever it is. But like, I want to just have a conversation around this question because I feel like we don't talk about it enough. Or when we do talk about it, we talk about it in very like politically correct ways, which like, you know how much I hate being politically correct. So, um, make sure you're following me over on Instagram at Mish Mish of Nutrish Mish. I'll link it in the show notes, and let's have a little like convo about this. I'll have a little bit of convo in my stories on Thursday, the day that this launches. But we'll continue the conversation there. But the question that I got asked, I'll read it. It's very very easy to read here. This one's a simple one. It says, "Dear Mish, just curious, do you plan on ever having kids?" That was it, and I was like, so here's the thing. I know that women get offended by this question. I know it's considered like socially inappropriate to ask this question. I never personally get offended when people ask me this question. Well, maybe start to create a little bit of a different conversation around this question and what it means and just my thought process behind it. Because I've always struggled to articulate an answer to this question that felt like good to me. So when I got this, I was like, you know what? Let me try to figure this out. And I'm sure somebody out there listening will be like, oh yeah, like that resonates. And maybe it'll help change the conversation as a whole. Who knows? But let's kind of break this down a little bit. So I remember being at a family event, and a family member said to me at the whatever table we were at, like, so like, you know, Michelle, what do you think? Are you thinking about, do you think you're gonna have kids? Like, what are you thinking about that? And before I could even answer, my mom like lashed out from across the room. I don't even know where she came from. And she was just like, like whoever it was, she's like, you can't ask that. That's so offensive. And like my mom was like offended for me, but like I wasn't offended. Like I've never taken that question offensively because I know when people ask it, they don't mean it offensively. I think, and again, I know and have so many friends who have dealt with infertility. I have so many friends that are trying and they want so badly to get pregnant and they can't. I know some people who have made the choice, conscious choice, like not to have children, and they feel judged for it. But I think the problem is that when people ask that question, I think a lot of us hear a deficiency. We're not hearing that question as it's intended. I think we're hearing that question as if there's something wrong with us or that we're not good enough. And I don't think that anybody who ever asks that question, like that's how they're intending it. I think it's just that, you know, in society, it's something that people do. And, you know, while society is changing and some people choose not to, whatever, like, I think it's just a genuine, I think it comes from a genuine place usually when people ask it. I don't think it's meant to be offensive, but we make it offensive and we take it personally. And that's the first thing I wanted to see if we could try to maybe do a little better with. And this is coming from someone who has not had any struggles. So I might feel very differently about this if I did. So if I'm speaking ignorantly, please forgive me. But just a thought, because when somebody asks something from a genuine place of just like curiosity, I think when we come back at them and make them feel like they did something wrong, I think it just makes people afraid to talk about things. If someone hears that question and they're struggling with infertility, they might not necessarily want to be reminded that they're going through this struggle, especially at a family gathering, but that person doesn't intend it that way. You know, it's sort of like if someone says like, how is your day? And you're having a shitty fucking day, you know, like that person didn't mean anything by it. They just wanted to know how your day was. Now you don't want to like dive into that you're having a shitty day, whatever, but like, but again, it's not intended that way. At least in my experience. If I'm thinking about this wrong, please let me know. So, of course, you could feel however you want to feel about it. But if you want to maybe protect your emotions a little bit, when someone asks you that question, instead of hearing judgment, instead of hearing whatever it is that you're feeling, I would just hear that they're just curious about your life, and then just answer whatever answer you want to say. But instead of feeling judgment, instead of feeling all those things, like they're just curious about your life. They could have asked how your job was. You know, they could have asked about anything. You know, now I'm sure there are cases where like you have a weird mother-in-law or something going on, and there is judgment behind that question. In that case, that's very different. But I think for the majority of people, when they ask that question, they don't mean it offensively. And if it is something that's emotionally charged for you, if you can just sort of hear, oh, I'm just curious about your life, instead of like feeling a specific way about it, it might just help protect your energy a little bit around it so that you don't feel as triggered. So this was always my struggle with answering that question, was like, I didn't know. Now, like, when I was younger, I always assumed that at some point in my life, everyone used to tell me, all my older mom like people, everyone, they would be like, ah, oh, just wait till you're like in your 30s, wait till something goes off in you, and then you're just like, I want to have kids. Like it'll happen. It happens for everybody. And now that I'm older, like I still haven't experienced that. But I don't also think that I don't want to have kids. If you talk to any single person in my life that like semi quasi knows me, they will tell you Michelle doesn't want to have kids. I've sort of like played up the fact that I didn't want to have kids because I didn't think that I could like be a good mom and also be a good businesswoman and own a business. And I've had my business since I was 23 years old. I've been an entrepreneur my entire career for the most part. So I have put so much time and energy into this, and it takes so much time and energy, that the thought of having a child, always felt to me like, well, I'm either not going to be a good mom because I'm not willing to take away time and energy from this like thing that I've created, or it meant that I would have to like take time and energy from this thing that I created in order to be a good mom. And I sort of just played up the, well, I don't want to have kids, I'm a business person, because like that's just sort of I sort of felt like I had to choose one or the other. And at the time I sort of felt like, well, I'm a career person, this is my career, like you can't have a good career and be an entrepreneur as well as be a good mom. You just can't do it. So, I mean, you guys know I'm divorced now, but so I got married, and then we all got married at the same time because we're all like COVID people. I think we literally had 85 weddings in 1 year. And then I see all my friends right after their weddings, they're all getting pregnant. My two best friends actually told me they were pregnant literally like on the same day, and they have kids like 2 weeks apart. And then I always thought, I was like, all right, when I see all my friends do it, like then I'll want to do it. But then I looked and I was like, I'm not in the place in my career that I want to. Like, I still have so much work I have to do in my career. Like, I can't have a kid now. And then I just felt very like unstable, because while I played up the fact that I didn't want kids, like part of me did, but I didn't feel like I could, and then still, keep my career going. And then if I can't keep my career going, like how am I going to be able to afford, like it just felt like an impossible situation. So then I see my friends have kids and they're incredible mothers, and like their whole world becomes about that. And then I'm like, all right, well, now I see them doing it, but I just didn't feel like I could. But it also wasn't like a strong no. Like some people are strong no. Like I wasn't strong no. Like in the back of my mind, I'm like, I feel like this could be an incredible experience that I would like to experience. I would like to have it. I would like to experience like raising a kid, but it's just like, but I didn't want to, but because I also don't want to make it my life, I don't know how to reconcile that, because I have this business. I have this whole other beautiful side to my life. And it's like, I'm thinking, do I need to give that up in order to have this experience? So that's where my confusion kind of settled for a long time. And again, this is my experience from not having a child, right? This is just my outward perception. This is just my like opinion piece. I might have a kid one day and turn around and be like, this was the stupidest podcast I ever did. I knew literally nothing. So if that's the case, I'm just speaking out of ignorance, whatever. But there's maybe more ignorant people like me, and I just want them to feel heard. So if that's the possibility, just we're doing it for us. If not, then maybe we're just changing the conversation a little bit. So whenever people ask me the question, do you want to have kids? In my mind, there was just always there's two personas. There's like the maternal persona, or there's the workaholic persona. And I always just sort of leaned into the workaholic persona because that's what I identified with and that's what I knew. And, if you ask any of my friends, like I said, that like sort of know me, they'll be like, Michelle, there's not a maternal moment in her body. Like she would never have kids. Like she likes to party and she likes to travel and she works a lot and like all of those things. Like, no, she definitely doesn't want it. But that's not true. I would love, I think, to have the experience of raising a child, but it's like, as a mom, you have to give up. Like, what do you have to give up in order to be a good mom? Now, the inspiration for this podcast was my boyfriend was telling me about a podcast he was listening to. And it wasn't anything about this, but it sort of connected weird dots in my head. So I'll tell you the background so you can maybe see how I got here. But it was an interesting, and again, I don't know if this was what this podcast was about. It might have been something totally different, but it was my interpretation of it. He was saying it was such a good podcast because it was saying how there's good men and then there's exceptional men, and that exceptional men are rare. And the podcast was talking about like there's good men. So good men are like good family men. Like they're good fathers. They're at the little league games. They're like doing the thing, whatever. They're good to their families. They're good to their communities. He's like, and then there are exceptional men, and exceptional men are good men, but they also make a big impact in the world. And it's very rare to have both. And he was telling me this about how he identified with that. And he's like, I want to be an exceptional man. And my boyfriend is a phenomenal father. Like watching him parent is insane. He's a great dad and it's inspirational to see. Um, and he is able to have this huge impact in the world because of, you know, his career that's blossoming and all of that. So he is able to have that. But that sparked this question in me, how the hell can I do that? Like, how can I do that? So as he's like describing this podcast to me and these personas to me, like in my head, like I was like, that's my problem. And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, literally what you just said is my problem. My problem is that I want both, but I don't know how to have both. Like, I don't know if there's a space in the world for a lot of women to be good women, if we want to describe it like that, where like if we're taking on the same definition in this podcast, where like, you know, they're good moms and they're, you know, have a good family and like all of that kind of stuff, as well as are able to and have the space and the bandwidth to have like a big impact in the world. Like I don't know if there's a space for women to be able to do that, but that's actually been my struggle my whole life with this question is like I've always felt like you could only do one or the other. So from my point of view, I see women who like they just know they just want to be moms. Like, yes, maybe they work, maybe they don't, but maybe they work, but they just work at jobs that are just for money. Like they don't really care. Like it's literally just a way to make money so that they can like enjoy their family. Like that's they're not fulfilled by their careers, which is fine. So those moms, I see that. Then I see, you know, and for using the definitions in this podcast, that would be like a good woman, whatever you want to call it, right? Then I see women who want both, right? They want both. So like they have careers and then they have the kid. And what I see a lot of the times is once they have the kid, their love and feeling of responsibility to be a good mom and to raise a good human becomes so overwhelming that they give up their career. They give up something that was so important to them. They give that up. And then I see women who like don't want to give that up. So they really try to do both, but they always sort of feel deficient. And I'm generalizing. I'm sure there are people, and if there is a formula out there, like let me know. Cause like this has been the struggle that I've had with this my entire life is that like I want both. I want to like have an incredible impact on a child and raise an amazing human, especially with somebody who's an amazing dad and like put this like diabolical kid out into the world. Like I think that would be such an incredible experience that if I don't have it, I would feel like I was missing out on something insane. But at the same time, it's so important to me to have a really big impact in the world, you know, through my career. And I just always struggled with the space to do that. And that's why I've always struggled with that question. So I've always like waited for this like magical moment to happen where I'm like, all right, I'm ready. I want to have a child. My ovaries have kicked in. My uterus is wait like I've never experienced that before. So I've always been like, shit, like what is wrong with me? So then like after thinking about it though, I'm like, what if it's not? What if what we're experiencing isn't necessarily like the need to have a child? What if we're really experiencing the need to create? What if that's like the feminine thing that we're all feeling is the need to create? And a lot of women get that need met through creating a child. Like you get to create a child and mold this incredible human and like put them out into the world. Like that's really cool to do. Like that's an amazing experience to have. But some women who maybe get labeled as workaholics and maybe get like judged for like that, maybe they get that need to create out in a different way. Maybe they are the ones who are making businesses or making an impact or like volunteering in community service. Like they're creating something, a product, good, a service, something else. And that's how they're getting that need met. So maybe we do all have the same need. It's just getting met in other ways. That's maybe a different way of thinking about it. Because I know for me, I've always felt judged to an extent when people asked me the kid question because they knew my answer to an extent and they knew that I got labeled a workaholic. And if, oh, she's a workaholic, she doesn't care about having a family. It's not that I don't care. It's just that like I am getting that need met in another way. So I don't have this like overwhelming urge or desire to have a kid because I feel like that need is getting met in that way. And I don't know if this is just me. I don't know if I'm looking at this wrong. You know, that's why I really kind of want to have a conversation about it. But if that's the case, then based on that podcast that my boyfriend was listening to, what if I wanted both? What if I wanted to, I don't want to say like good and exceptional woman or man as that guy did. Let's think about it as like micro and macro impact, right? Like we can have a micro impact. I don't know if that's the right word, but we'll go with it. By having a kid, like what if I want to have an impact in the world and create in the world by having a kid and having that experience? Because obviously all of my friends' kids are very young right now. So they're all like in it and they're all like, shit, did we make a mistake? I think all of them a little bit are like, oh my God, this is rough. But for the most part, like it seems like such a beautiful experience that they're enjoying. And my friends who have older kids, they're like, they really enjoy it. And then I see my boyfriend and I see him be a father and I see like how much that fulfills him. And I'm just like, shit, like, am I missing something here? So there's the ability to create in that way. But then is it possible to then also have a big impact on the world? Like I want to do. And I think a lot of females who like to create and have an impact, through their businesses or through work or through whatever other means, like, is there the space to do both? And I've never figured it out. And that's why I've struggled with that question. So I think when people have this conversation, they talk about a lot of the obvious things. Like obviously there's a biological time pressure, if we want to call it that. I mean, I'm in my mid-30s, so it's like, all right, like obviously there's that, but I really don't like to think about that. I always, if it's supposed to happen, it's supposed to happen. I try not to put that pressure on myself. But then there's also, the conversation about, well, like, okay, obviously it is much easier for guys to be able to have both. Like guys could be great dads and show up and provide impact when it's, necessary. And then they can go off and like have these careers. But I don't know if we have that space for women because somebody has to be watching the kid all the time, right? So it's like it would be nice to like pop in and pop out and like have these moments of, inspiration and impact that you can have on a kid. But then there's also like they have to be tended to all the time by someone. So whether that's you or like a nanny or whatever, and then there's the question of can you afford help? Can you afford the nanny? Can you afford daycare? Are there any negative impacts to that? Like I don't know the answer to the question of do I want to have kids because I don't understand how the things that are important to me in my life fit into that. Do I want the experience? Yeah, I think it would be really cool, especially like I said, watching my boyfriend, and the impact that he has on his son and how much he gets out of being a father. That was really impactful on me. I think I might have answered the question differently before even seeing that. But I don't know if that space exists, and I think that's maybe more of the interesting conversation to have, and not in a way where we're like bashing men and the patriarchy and like what, like, it is what it is, right? Like let's have conversations not about like what's not fair right now. Let's have conversations about like, all right, we recognize that there's this problem now, like what do we do about it, so I wanted to just maybe like open up a little bit of a different avenue for the conversation. So, do I want to have a kid? Yes, I would love to have a kid. Do I want to do it at the expense of stunting my career or stunting the impact that I could have in the world? Not really. I haven't even started my career yet. I feel like I'm literally just getting started. So, do I want to give all of that up, to have a kid? No. So, like, I don't know where that leaves all of us, like, but do I have to give it up? I'm not sure. So, like, I just think it's an interesting perspective because I think women typically I labeled myself as a long time as like a workaholic and someone who just wasn't maternal. And it's not that I'm not maternal. I sort of played up that role just because I sort of just felt like, oh, like this is just how I'm getting labeled. I kind of like let myself fall into that box a little bit, but it's not that I don't. I just never really saw how it would fit in because I want to have that micro and macro impact that was spoken about in that podcast. I want to be able to have that, that be like that good family person as well as like have a major impact. And I don't know how people do both. So maybe I'll figure it out one day and I'll report back and we'll do another podcast. But in the meantime, I just want to do just have that conversation and shift it. I've never heard anyone talk about that side of it before. I hear people talk about the pressures of, the biological clock. I've heard, people talk about the pressures of being the workaholic and feeling judged for it or giving up the career and like all those types of things. I've heard of all that, but I never heard someone just sort of say like they wanted both and like how do we make that happen? So just something to think about. Hit me up on Instagram. Let me know your thoughts on this. Super, super curious, actually. So hit me up on Instagram, slide into my DMs. If I have the little sticker up on my stories, you can answer me there too. And let's like have a little convo about this. Like, how do we fix this? How do we change this? How do we create the space for both? I will see you guys next Thursday.